The Langford Winter Ball had gathered 30 unmarried ladies beneath one roof, and every one of them knew the Duke was expected to choose a wife before the season ended. Chandeliers threw light across the ballroom floor. Silver trays moved through the crowd, and the orchestra kept up a bright, insistent rhythm. Mothers steered daughters toward the best candlelight. Fathers stood in low clusters, trading acreage and dowries the way other men traded weather. Sebastian Vale, Duke of Langford, had already danced 3 times. Miss Farrow had recited her accomplishments unasked, her French and her watercolours offered in the same breath as a curtsy. Lady Sophronia Kemp had laughed at everything he said, her eyes flicking past his shoulder to see who marked the attention. Miss Pruitt Halloway had studied his boots and shoulders with the frank calculation of a woman pricing a horse, smiling as though she believed herself subtle. He had bowed to each in turn, said the correct things, and felt, as he always felt at these gatherings, like a ledger being totalled by candlelight. Lady Beatrice Vale appeared at his elbow and adjusted one amethyst bracelet. "You are meant to look pleased, Sebastian. I have assembled the finest unmarried women in 3 counties for you." Sebastian watched another mother guide her daughter toward the dance floor. "I am aware, Aunt. I counted them coming in." Lady Beatrice followed his gaze toward the terrace doors. "Lady Helena has just arrived, speaking with the Ashworths." She studied his face and found nothing in it to satisfy her. "You do not sound as though you see her with any enthusiasm." He excused himself with a murmur about air and turned toward what he believed was the terrace door. It was not the terrace. It was a narrow service passage, plain-walled, smelling of hot wax and roasting meat. A woman stood a few feet away with a tray of glasses braced against her hip, one hand pressed to her opposite palm. A glass had cracked, a thin line of blood had escaped between her fingers, and she was already winding a strip of linen around the cut, angling her hand so nothing would fall on the tray cloth beneath the crystal. She looked up. Her eyes were grey and entirely unimpressed by his coat. Sebastian glanced at the linen already reddening at her fingers. "You've cut yourself." She finished the linen with one brisk motion, holding it fast with her thumb while she checked the cloth for stains, and found none. A glass cracked. It happens, with this many guests wanting champagne at once. She glanced past him toward the ballroom, then back, weighing him the way she might weigh a delay in the kitchen. "If you mean to be useful, sir, the most useful thing you can do is step aside. The hot course comes through in a minute, and this passage will not hold a gentleman in good boots and a footman carrying soup." He stepped back against the wall. She swept past him, tray steady despite the wound, and did not look back. For the first time that evening, a woman had spoken to him without performing for him. He returned to the ballroom, but some part of his attention stayed in that passage. Climbing the stairs near 2 in the morning, he remembered not her face first, but her hands, the way she had turned her palm to keep the blood from the cloth, the flat certainty in her voice when she told him to move. Mrs. Hartley mentioned the girl's name the following afternoon, setting the week's accounts on his desk. "Anna Mercer, Your Grace, the new upper kitchen maid. She was carrying glasses last night, we being short of hands for the ball. Physician's daughter before her father passed and left her nothing but debts. She reads a hand better than I do, and Mr. Whitfield laid up with his chest. She has been helping me check the kitchen invoices in his stead." He set down the account book without opening it further. "Is she in the kitchens permanently?" "She is, Your Grace. Cook has already grown fond of her." Mrs. Hartley folded her hands and studied him with the carefulness of a woman sensing a question behind a question. "Is there some difficulty?" He turned back to the ledger before him. "None. I only wondered." That evening he reviewed the cellar book and found what he had half suspected: wine ordered twice in the same fortnight and paid for twice, silver moved between family and formal service without the inventory corrected, candles marked delivered a week before the carrier's receipt showed them arriving. Nothing sinister, only a steward too ill to catch his own errors, and a household too large to run on memory alone. The under-housemaids were already being quietly blamed for the shortfall. It seemed only reasonable to ask someone who understood the kitchens well enough to sort truth from habit. It seemed only reasonable to ask for Anna Mercer. She arrived in the small estate office the next morning with ink already on her fingers and no evident surprise at being summoned by a duke. The door stood open behind her, and Mrs. Hartley could be heard moving through the corridor beyond, counting linens aloud to herself. Sebastian set the cellar book between them and opened it to the disputed page. "Mrs. Hartley says you can read Cobb's hand better than the steward can." Anna drew the ledger toward herself and ran one finger down the column of figures. "Mrs. Hartley is generous. I can read Mr. Cobb's hand because my father wrote worse, and I spent 10 years deciphering his prescriptions for the apothecary." She turned to the wine entries first. "You want to know where the wine has gone." He turned the book so the wine entries faced her fully. "I want to know why the household believes it has gone anywhere at all." She looked up at that, gave a shorter curtsy than she had offered on entering, and turned another page. "Then we shall begin with the cellar." It took 3 mornings to prove what the numbers already suggested. The wine had been billed twice by a supplier, grown careless with a household too occupied to check him. The silver had never left the house, only moved between 2 ledgers no one had reconciled since Michaelmas. The candles had been recorded before the cart reached the door, a habit of the previous stewards no one had troubled to correct. Anna set it all down in a fresh page, tidy and undeniable, and closed the book. "No thief," she said, "only tired bookkeeping and a merchant glad no one was watching closely enough to notice." Sebastian studied the neat new page. "You make it sound almost disappointing." Anna closed the book firmly. "I find tired bookkeeping considerably less trouble than a thief, Your Grace, and it means old Ruth's grandson, Tam, may stop being blamed for it, along with the other maids who work the cellar." It became, over the following fortnight, a habit neither of them named: the estate office in the mornings, the library after supper, door left ajar, and a footman's steps still audible in the passage beyond, when a stray figure needed a second pair of eyes by candlelight. On such evening, the accounts already settled, Anna reached for her shawl and found a book lying beside the ledgers, a worn medical text, spine cracked from use, that Sebastian had pulled from the shelf out of idle curiosity and left open. Anna touched the corner of the page rather than the book itself, the words escaping before she could stop them. "That was my father's, or one very like it. He kept 3 such volumes and read them until the bindings gave out." Sebastian closed the cellar ledger, though the figures had balanced an hour before. "You told me once he taught you to know a true fever from a false one by the 2nd day." Anna's hand went still on the page. "I mentioned that a single time, in passing, weeks ago." Sebastian met her eyes across the ledgers. You did. She studied him for a moment, the way she had studied the cellar figures, weighing whether the sum was honest. Most men remember what a woman looks like in a ballroom, Your Grace, and forget everything she says within the hour. He set the ledger aside entirely, giving her his full attention. I find the reverse considerably more useful. A short laugh escaped her, more surprise than amusement. Fernhollow wants information more than money, if you are asking. Mrs. Aldous has more patience than pamphlets. Half the village treats a burn with butter, because no one has told them otherwise. Sebastian turned that over for a moment. Then the dispensary needs books, not coin. Anna reached for the medical volume at the same moment he did. Their hands nearly met over the spine, and he withdrew first, leaving it to her. It needs both, in truth, but I have never met a duke offer to fund a lending shelf before curfew. Anna lifted the book and held it against her ledger, weighing one against the other. Have you found another discrepancy tonight, Your Grace, or merely another reason to keep me here past the hour Mrs. Hartley expects me? He held her gaze without apology. Both, I think. Anna tucked the book beneath her arm, already smiling in a way she plainly had not intended him to see. That is an honest answer, at least. She left without looking back. The footman's steps in the passage had long since faded, and neither of them had noticed when. Some nights later, working through a stack of merchants' bills in the storeroom, Anna set down the crate she had been counting and looked at him directly. You were not choosing among the ladies at that ball, Your Grace. You were the one being chosen, displayed rather. Like the good silver, brought out for company and put away again after. Sebastian leaned against the doorframe. That is an ungenerous way of putting it. Anna did not pause in her counting. Is it inaccurate? He considered this longer than he liked. No, I had not thought of it in quite those terms. I do not think I understood until recently how completely that evening reduced every person in the room to a sum of fortune and lineage and face, my own included. Anna returned to the crate, counting bottles by touch. Welcome to being valued for your usefulness, Your Grace. We have understood that particular arithmetic rather longer than you have. He found he could not argue with it, and found, more troublingly, that he did not wish to. Trouble came at the season's next assembly, when a leaking cloakroom window sent Anna moving the guests' cloaks to drier ground. Lady Ashworth's cloak passed through her hands for perhaps a minute. By the time the dancing resumed, the jeweled clasp that fastened it was gone. Lady Ashworth clutched the ruined cloak to her chest, colour high. She was carrying it, the kitchen girl, not 10 minutes before I found the clasp missing. Sebastian reached the cloakroom to find Anna standing very still, chin lifted, 2 footmen hovering and Mrs. Hartley wringing her hands at the door. Sebastian stepped between Anna and the nearest footman, and the room went quiet. No one searches her. No one searches anyone until I have heard exactly what happened, in order, from everyone who touched that cloak tonight. He questioned the footman who had first noticed the leak, then the maid who had helped Anna move the garments. He asked Lady Ashworth precisely where she had last felt the clasp secure, and had the cloak brought to the lamp and examined seam by seam until a loose stitch gave way beneath careful fingers. The clasp dropped into his palm, caught in the lining the entire while, never stolen at all. Anna was cleared before midnight. She offered him a quiet, formal word of thanks and returned to her work as though nothing had happened. but the household had watched their duke take a kitchen maid's word over a countess's accusation without a moment's hesitation, and by morning so had half the county. Anna closed the cellar ledger between them with a soft, final sound 3 days later in the library where they had spent so many evenings, the door no longer standing open behind her the way it once had. We cannot continue meeting. Gossip does not wound a duke. Eccentric, they will call you, perhaps foolish. It will wound me a great deal more, calculating, ambitious, worse words than that in some mouths. A duke can survive gossip. A maid without a character can lose every respectable position open to her. Sebastian set down the pen he had been holding. I could find you a position elsewhere, somewhere the talk wouldn't follow. You could. She folded her hands over the closed ledger. And I would be a woman quietly placed somewhere convenient by a man who still means to marry within his rank when the season allows it. I would rather not be that woman, Your Grace, however comfortable the placing. I have already written to Mrs. Aldous at Fernhollow. She has offered me a position. I mean to take it. He had no honest argument to make. He remained beside the closed ledger long after the door shut behind her, the pen still in his hand and the page beneath it unread. At the season's final ball, Lady Helena Ormond wore ivory silk near the terrace doors, composed as ever. Sebastian danced with her because avoiding it would have been its own unkindness. Halfway through the figure, Helena turned under his hand and studied his face rather than the floor. You keep looking toward the service doors. You have done it all evening and at every gathering since Christmas, though I imagine you believe it is not obvious. Sebastian began to speak her name, but she continued before he could finish. I am a sensible woman. I do not require flowery declarations, and I would have made you a perfectly adequate wife, as you would have made me a perfectly adequate husband. She released his hand as the music ended and stepped back with her dignity entirely intact. But I find I have no wish to spend my life married to a man watching a door I do not stand in. Good evening, Your Grace. Sebastian remained on the floor for one measure after the music stopped, then turned toward the service doors instead of returning to his aunt. Anna's final evening in the household fell 3 days later. She was to leave for Fernhollow at week's end. Sebastian found his aunt in the middle of the ballroom, with enough of the county in earshot that the words would travel by morning, whether he wished it slow or not. There will be no engagement announced this season, Aunt Beatrice. I will not marry to satisfy the calendar. I am sorry for the disappointment, and I do not intend to cause more of it by pretending otherwise any longer. Lady Beatrice's face moved through several expressions before settling on something that was neither approval nor defeat. You will be the talk of 3 counties by Tuesday. Sebastian bowed to her, unhurried. I expect so. He left through the same door he had used months before, into the same passage that smelled of hot wax and roasting meat, and found Anna exactly where he had first seen her, tray in hand, linen still tucked at her wrist from an old habit of care. He took the tray from her hands and set it on the sideboard, and only then spoke. There is no engagement. I have told my aunt, and half the ballroom besides, so it will be known by breakfast, whether I wished it known slowly or not. Your place at Fernhollow is yours. I have made no arrangement about it, asked no favor, decided nothing about your future without your leave to decide it. I am not asking you to be my secret, Anna. I am asking permission to court you honestly in the open for as long as it takes you to trust that I mean it." Anna studied him the way she had once studied a disputed column of figures. "And you understand what will be said." Sebastian held her gaze without flinching from it. "Some will call it scandal for years, Anna, and mean it. Some doors may never open to us again, and I cannot promise my rank will soften that. I find I can endure their opinion of me a good deal more easily than I can go on arranging your future without asking you first. I believe someone once told me that stepping aside was the most useful thing I could do. I would rather step aside for the truth than remain standing in the way of it." She set down the strip of linen she had still been holding and drew off her glove, finger by finger, before placing her bare hand in his. "Then you may call on me at Fernhollow, Your Grace, and we shall see." Several months later, Sebastian arrived at the dispensary at Fernhollow with a crate of medical books braced against his hip, and carried it in himself rather than sending for a footman. "Where would you like them?" Their courtship had been neither quiet nor easy. Some drawing-rooms remained closed to them permanently, invitations quietly withdrawn and never reissued. A few of his father's oldest friends wrote letters he chose not to answer, their silence telling him some relationships had ended for good. Lady Ashworth never forgave the public discovery that her own accusation, not Anna's conduct, had embarrassed the room that night, and stayed civil at a distance and no closer. But the village knew Sebastian now by more than his title, as the man who came every fortnight, who had learned the names of Ruth's grandson Tam and the innkeeper's daughter, who sat on the dispensary's hard bench and listened before offering anything at all. By the second month, Mrs. Aldous no longer announced his arrival. She simply pointed him toward the crowded bench and trusted him to make himself useful. Anna kept her position through it all, her name on the ledger beside Mrs. Aldous's own, her wages her own to spend or save as she chose. Sebastian never asked her to give it up. They married the following spring, with Mrs. Hartley weeping openly and Lady Beatrice pronouncing herself, at last, entirely satisfied. At the wedding breakfast, old Ruth pressed a sprig of rosemary into Anna's hand for luck, and Anna kept it pinned to her sleeve the whole day. Mrs. Hartley sent the old service tray to Fernhollow not long after, properly struck from the household inventory with Sebastian's own signature beneath the entry. A wedding gift, she said, from a house that had never quite known how to thank Anna for finding its missing wine. In the small sitting-room at Fernhollow, where they spent most of their evenings, the tray sat on a shelf by the window. It no longer carried champagne glasses for aristocratic guests. It held a teapot, 2 cups, and a stack of well-worn medical books, waiting to be lent out to whoever next came asking.